All right, hey everyone, we should be live. Welcome to another geopolitical stream on the Tone Faces new YouTube channel for geopolitics. Man, the last 48 hours have been absolutely crazy. I have been meaning to do a video on the Trump administration and the absolute atrocious selections for government officials that Trump has been doing. I have a feeling that the next 4 years are going to be as very, very eventful. I will probably be a lot more critical of the Trump administration on this channel than you guys are probably expecting. As everybody knows, I voted for Trump prior to me voting for Trump all 3 times, by the way. I attended the January 6th protest in support of Trump, and I am very unhappy with what Trump is already doing, and he is not the president yet. However, I do not regret my vote. A part of my vote was that Trump would be significantly better for Bitcoin, and no matter what happens in geopolitics, no matter how many additional wars Trump is going to start, and I think he will start several and continue every war we have, he will be good for Bitcoin. And I'm not saying that the Democrats would have created less havoc. That's not true either. I think that it's still the better choice of the two choices that we had, but I'm not expecting anything good to come from the Biden administration. We're going to do full-blown videos on that in the future. This video will focus on Syria, but before I talk about Syria, I do need to do a big speech how and what led up to the whole Syria debacle, and most of it, not most of it, sorry. So half of it has to do with Russia and half of it has to do with Israel independently. But anyway, it's going to be a good stream. Looks like Bitcoin Mechanic has joined me for the stream. It's great. 1 second.
Hey, Tom, let me know if you can hear me okay.
Hey, man. Yep, I hear you. It's a little low, but I do hear you.
I'll turn that up.
Maybe you can raise your volume up a bit.
Yeah,
And if anyone's wondering where I am I'm in Aruba. I'm on a little family vacation here, and I'll be back home in Panama in a few days. So I'm taking time off from the beach. Tomorrow I'm going diving for hours and hours, so you're not going to see me in the morning. May not be a stream in the morning with Matt McGregor because I'll be scuba diving, going out to see some shipwrecks. My new hobby is scuba diving. All right, mechanic, let's check your mic.
Yo, should be good now.
Maybe. Oh, it's on my end. My bad. I have my volume really low. Say something.
Something. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, yeah.
Test.
Way
Test.
better.
Okay.
Way better. Okay. So, do I just start jumping into everything, or do you have anything to say? Add. Hope you guys got to start mining more blocks. You got to do something here.
Oh yeah, man. Well, you can't have good luck without bad luck. And you're mining with us, right? So it's your fault that you didn't find any blocks. It's not our fault.
All right. Okay. Looking at the live chat. Hey, can you keep it in the live chat for me?
You want me to look at the live chat?
Like in general, right? Like while I'm speaking, see if there's any good questions, to see if there's any fact checks on what
certainly.
I say, things like that.
Yeah, I'll pull it out in pop-up mode.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Okay. So, okay. Let's go straight to the maps, actually. I usually use this map, but we have a better map. I don't know why I wasn't using it before. The map from Military Summary. A brief update on Russia-Ukraine, though this is not the focus of this video. Not the Russia-Ukraine part anyway, but Russia and periphery is going to be mentioned. So, Russia-Ukraine, Russia is advancing heavily on the fronts. You can see this map is really good. These black lines are fortified positions. So you see how Ukraine has massive fortified positions here in the northern Donbas front, which is why this is the slowest moving Russian advance. Ukraine's most defended city is the city of Pokrovsk. And you can see how Russian troops have already entered a part of this defensive line here and here. And the moment the city falls, Ukraine is in serious trouble. Like the whole front line collapses, and there is nothing Ukraine
you're not
can
sharing
do.
screen, brother.
Whoa, what's going on?
You're not sharing screen.
Oh, I'm not? Okay, this is why I have people with me here. Shit. Okay, wait. My bad. Okay, awesome. Okay.
I just see black here. I don't see a map.
Okay, let's wait.
Oh, there you go. No, it's loaded now.
Yeah, clearly some issues. Okay, yeah, I'm getting like phone calls. I'm getting everything now. Okay. We're good, we're good, we're good, we're good. I'm trying to keep an eye on it a while. My internet here is not great. Okay, here we go. We're good. We're good. Why are people still calling me? Dude, I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it. Okay. So this is a really good map. It shows the fortified positions of the Ukrainian army. This is the reason why Russia is struggling to advance in the northern Donbass. Now, this green dark zone, this is the area of Russia that Russia is claiming to be Russia. These are part of those regions that Russia has annexed. You can see how this northern region, they pretty much took it all. But down here, they are still have a long way to go. Same thing over here, but there's a land barrier over here there's a land barrier over here with the river, even though the dam was broken and the river is not there much. Anyway, the thing is, this is the most fortified city in Ukraine. If this city falls, the entire Ukrainian front line collapses, and Russia will have no resistance going all the way to the Dnieper River. And the reason for that is once the city falls, Russia would be able to outflank this entire Ukrainian stronghold from this north side. They could just go north and around and completely surround this region. They would also focus on breaking this area and surrounding it from both sides. That's what's going to happen once Pokrovsk falls. And not only would Russia be able to go north, they would also be able to go south and completely outflank this area. And all these Ukrainian troops that are stuck right here are already in trouble. Okay, so just a quick update on the Russia-Ukraine front, because I haven't done a video in a while. As for the Kursk region, at the moment, it looks like the Russian plan is not to try and take this territory back by attacking from the north. The plan is to, again, create a full surrounding of the Ukrainian troops by attacking here on the south side from the east and from the west, in order, if these troops can meet in the middle, whether it's on Ukrainian territory or on Russian territory, they will completely surround all of these Ukrainian troops in the north, and they will be in absolute serious trouble. Now, let's go to the other issues before we get on to the Middle East. So let me zoom this whole world out. The plan for US to create a regime change in Russia does not begin and end with Ukraine. It involves every single country that has Russians in it and is friendly to Russia. So this is why now that the Ukraine is completely collapsing for the United States and NATO, trouble is starting all over the Russian periphery. Let's go to Moldova. This requires its own video. The elections in Moldova were complete and utter bullshit. The majority of Moldovans do not want this current president who is pro-EU and anti-Russia. Moldova is expected to be the next Ukrainian front. Now, how did she get elected? Mechanic, do you know anything about Moldova?
Not at all.
Excellent. So probably like the average person that doesn't pay attention to these things. So here's how the election played out in Moldova. Moldova was part of the Soviet Union. So the majority of Moldovans, if not the whole country, speaks Russian. There was lots of Russians in Moldova, but most of them went back to Russia. Now, the European Union is big. There is a lot of Moldovans spread out across the entire European Union. But the amount of Moldovans that live in Russia is almost the same amount as the amount of Moldovans that live over the entire European Union. In addition, this area here is called Transnistria, and it is part of Moldova. It's part of the country of Moldova, but they have declared autonomy, no different than what Donbass tried to do, since from 2014 up until 2021, when Russia had to intervene. So this is the ultra pro-Russian area of Moldova, and these are the people that refuse to leave the country to live in Russia. They want to still live in Moldova, but they are so pro-Russia that they decided to create their own state. And if they are not able to become their own country, or they are not able to put in a president that cares about their needs and their issues, they're kind of hoping that Russia takes over Odessa and has a direct bridge to Transnistria, which will then vote to join Russia. Now, here's how elections in Moldova went. There are polling stations. There were almost no polling stations in Transnistria. So the people from Transnistria that wanted to vote in the Moldovan election had to cross into hostile territory, because this is almost like its own land here. They had to cross into the mainland in order to have their vote counted. There were almost no places to vote in this region, even though Moldova says, this is our country, this is our land, you people, are trying to create your own country, but we're not going to give you the ability to vote for a president that you actually may get along with. In addition, the Moldovans living in the European Union were allowed to vote in the Moldovan election. And they had numerous places to vote. So Italy, for example, I think had like 1,000 places all over Italy for Moldovans to vote. Now, the amount of Moldovans living in Italy is tiny compared to the amount of Moldovans living in Russia. Guess how many places in all of Russia Moldovans were allowed to vote for the Moldovan president? Give me a number, mechanic. You're muted. Maybe he's not on. Anyway, I'm not going to wait. There were only two places. There was like 1 million Moldovans, or like something like that, or maybe not 1 million. Over 100,000 Moldovans living in Russia. They had 2 places to vote, probably one in Moscow and maybe one in St. Petersburg. So guess what? If you're not, so the only reason why this president got elected, or prime minister, or whatever they're calling him, the only reason why she got elected was because the European Union had completely interfered in the election, creating a pro-European president whose parliament is actually anti-European integration. And the majority of the people here they're I'm not going to say they're anti-European integration. They are anti-European integration if it means a war with Russia. Okay, they want to stay neutral. They want to continue doing business with Russia. They want to continue to speak Russian. But the European Union will not let them have any of those things, because either you are joining the European Union and you have to cut all ties with Russia and your ancestry and your religion and your language. You can't have any of those things. And you have to put missiles to potentially, we can use those missiles to fire at Moscow from your country. Otherwise, you don't have a choice in the matter, right? So that's basically the European Union. They're doing exactly the same thing in the Republic of Georgia as well. So this is how the United States is causing issues with Russia. And I'm going to loop this into Syria in a minute. Georgia is having the same exact problem, except the difference in Georgia is that the Georgians were able to see through the bullshit of the West, and they voted for I'm not going to say a pro-Russian leader, but a leader that doesn't want to put missiles in Georgia and fire them at Moscow. So, for the EU, this is unacceptable. The president of the Republic of Georgia must be a Russian hater, and he must put missiles in Georgia and point them right at the Kremlin. Otherwise, this country doesn't deserve to have a place on this planet. That is basically the position of the United States and the European Union. Okay, so Georgia elected a government that is not interested in putting missiles in Georgia pointed at Moscow, and the European Union is having a fit, like the world is ending, and they have started their revolutionary protests in Tbilisi that the Georgian government is trying to, contain, something that the Ukrainian government was not able to do back in 2014. Okay, now we're now going to head over to Asia and South Korea. Again, all of these things deserve their own videos in detail. So I'm just giving you the small highlights here. South Korean president, who is basically, it's the same playbook over and over again. The United States is the current Biden administration with the current South Korean president, who is not all that left. This president is not very left, but not being left is a part of it. This particular president is in love with the Biden administration, okay? He does not have support in the parliament or prime minister or whatever, the supreme leader of South Korea, okay? And he is fully on board with Project Ukraine, trying to send as many weapons and as many missiles to Ukraine in order to fight Russia. So this South Korean leader is fully on board with an anti-Russia regime. Now, being anti-Russia, of course, means you are as anti-North Korea as possible. And things aren't going well for him and his control of the South Korean government. So out of the blue, he decides to create martial law in order to take full control as the dictator of South Korea. We all heard of dictators in North Korea, but what the South Korean leader tried to do is literally channel his Kim Jong-un and arrest his opposition and other members of parliament in order to create martial law, so that ultimately him and his wife don't get, don't go to prison for corruption, and send off as many missiles into Ukraine to fight off the fictional North Korean army that supposedly is fighting on behalf of Russia. And he has called out his opposition as North Korean moles that are trying to, that North Korea has infiltrated all of his opposition in South Korea. This, of course, backfired badly, and he will probably be, impeached in the coming days. That should be very, very interesting. But again, While South Korea doesn't exactly border Russia, this is a similar battle where the United States has completely corrupt lapdog leaders all around the world that want to cause maximum problems between the two American biggest enemies, which are Russia and China. So South Korea, control of South Korea would, of course, create big problems in American war against China, and it would certainly help in the American war against Russia, because if South Korea decides to attack North Korea, which the United States wouldn't mind at all, Russia would, of course, now have to go and defend North Korea as well, or help in North Korea. See, Russia now has to assist the Republic of Georgia. Oops, I just moved Bibi Netanyahu into Pakistan. That's actually hilarious. The world would be way better if he wasn't freaking Pakistan. I'm gonna leave him there. So now Russia has to divert its attention to Georgia to prevent a full-blown Ukraine-style revolt. They have to divert their attention to Moldova to prevent a disaster happening there. They now have to potentially keep an eye on North Korea in case this becomes a full-blown dictatorship, South Korea dictatorship in order to deal with the North Korea in that region. And of course, Russia has been supporting Syria since 2015. Now, this brings me to Syria, and here we go. Hope you guys didn't mind the global history lesson. Mechanic, did you hear everything I said? Anything you want to comment before I move on to the topic of the day, which is Syria?
Yeah, no, I'm curious to get to Syria.
Okay, so here we go with Syria. I'm not going to get into Israel today. So Israel is not able to, wipe out all of the Palestinians in Gaza. They are actually doing a way better job in cleaning out the West Bank of Palestinians in order to take over this land. It's a little bit easier. This is a little more spread out, and they're getting a lot less military resistance of people firing back at them. Now, everything started with the ceasefire with Lebanon and Hezbollah. Now, why did the ceasefire come about? So these are all Tone Vays opinions, okay? Now, Hezbollah was putting up quite a fight, even though they lost their leaders. The pager attack was bad. Israel was certainly causing a lot of damage in South Lebanon. Now, Lebanon was also borderline interested in this peace deal because they realized that Israel was actually a pretty formidable force, and they were a bit disorganized. Now, a ceasefire for Israel means that one side stops firing, but they can certainly fire for whatever reason. So Israel has already broken this ceasefire, and they have already fired into Lebanon several times, but the fighting has somewhat stopped. Now, once this fighting has stopped, and Israel had to stop it as well, their military was very, very exhausted. They were losing a lot of men, and it was also to Israel's advantage to take a break. Now, when these ceasefires happen, like the one that's supposed to be happening right now in Syria, and the one that the US is trying to create in Ukraine, all it does is it gives time for the United States and Israeli, in the case of Middle East, forces to regroup and create a new attack, okay? Now, Russia has been somewhat defending Syria. Syria was supposed to be dismantled the way Libya was and Iraq was back in 2014 and 2015, but Russia intervened, and Russia prevented the collapse of Syria, and they have stabilized the situation. This area in red is controlled and defended by the Russian military. Let's go to a slightly different map here. I'm going to pull up Nope. Where are my maps? Here. Okay. I have two maps here. They're both, so this is a map of American military bases in Syria. And let's look at what forces there are in Syria. The yellow is controlled by Assad, well, were controlled. Everything is in past tense. By the way, last I heard on Bashar al-Assad, he is safe in Russia. He did make it out. This morning, there were rumors that Assad is dead, that he tried to flee on a plane that was shut down. Last I heard, he is in Russia with his family. He sent his family to Russia. A part of it went to Russia, and a part of it went somewhere else. I think to I forgot. It might have been UAE. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. But that happened a day or two ago, and he stayed in Syria. But this morning he did leave for Russia, and apparently he did make it there safely. That's the latest rumor. I don't know that for a fact. So the yellow part, we have the big city of Damascus, you have Aleppo up here in the north, and then you have Hama. These are like basically the three biggest cities. Aleppo is not listed here on this map. These are the three biggest cities in Syria. They were all still controlled by the Syrian army. Now, clearly, and Russian forces are over here on the Mediterranean Sea. This looks very bad for Russia. Let me start off with this fact. But Russian military is a little preoccupied in Ukraine. And now, in the last couple of months, the Russian military had to, make plans for Georgia and Moldova based on, the proxy wars that the West is trying to create in those regions. And so Syria was probably, they weren't paying attention to the massive plan by the United States and Israel and Turkey to attack Syria. Now, I'm going to talk about Turkey and Russia. This is going to create massive problems between Turkey and Russia. Now, the purple area is the SDF. SDF is mostly the Kurds. The Kurds are, it's a whole complicated topic with the Kurds. They are predominantly Turkish, but Turkey doesn't want them. So the best way for me to explain the Turkish problem with the Kurds is similar to the Zionist problem with the Palestinians. They want them off their land, basically. So Turkey wants to get rid of the Kurds. But unlike the genocidal Zionists, the thing with the Turkey and the Kurds, Turkey is actually helping the Kurds to get off of Turkish land. So Turkey would be happy if the Kurds had their own country, or there was an autonomous region belonging to Turkey where the Kurds can live out their own stuff without contributing to the Turkish political system. They don't want them in their parliament. They don't want them voting in their elections. And whatever helps Turkey get rid of the Kurds off of the Turkish border, they will support. So this is the main driver of Turkey attacking Syria, is that they get to push the Kurds problem onto another country or create a country of their own for the Kurds. Now, the United States is in this region with the Kurds. The Kurds are not a terrorist organization. They are a lot more, communicative, let's put it that way, than some of the other factions like ISIS, for example, and other terrorist groups that the US has created in the Middle East and continuing to support and military train and provide weapons to. But the Kurds, I'm not going to put into that category. They are not on the United States list of terrorist organizations. Here's the list, by the way. you can look at all the terrorist organizations as listed by the United States State Department. And these military bases are mostly protecting America's oil interests. You can see right here, Conoco and other nice oil-rich areas of Syria that the United States is controlling in Syria, and that's why the US military is in Syria. This is another zone of United States military base. It's on this map, it's referred to as Al-Tanf, deconfliction zone. This is the area where the United States military fully trains terrorist organizations for their own personal use in destabilizing the Middle East. This is where that takes place. Okay, so this is basically where the United States is training ISIS and ISIL-like organizations. Okay, and these other groups here are other more violent borderline terrorist organizations. These, however, are supported by Turkey, because just like the United States has some control over Turkey, just like the US military is training Islamic terrorist organizations for their own purposes in the region, so is Turkey, but Turkey is doing it up in the north, while the United States is doing it in the south. Now, what is happening down here in the southeast? In the southeast, Israel is, of course, doing the same thing. If we click over to another map, this is on part of Syria that Israel has taken over. This is the Golan Heights. This is Syrian land that has been taken over by Zionist Israel for their own purposes. And of course, Israel is also happy to support militarily and provide weapons to Islamic terrorist groups, just like they originally supported and created Hamas for their own preferences. We're not going to get into that in this video. I have discussed it in other videos, right? So again, what is the main purpose of Turkey and US and Israel arming, trading, and supporting Islamic terrorist organizations? And the reason for that is these organizations are completely independent. They do not like each other. They don't like Syria either. And like these blobs here are ISIS. These are the dark spots, ISIS and ISIL. This is the Syria's Islamic State. And these kinds of regions are popping up everywhere, trained by these three independent entities. And not only do they all hate each other and disagree with each other, they also hate pretty much everyone in the region, but they are small enough that once they completely destabilize Syria, the view from the United States and Turkey and Israel is we deal with these groups later, but for now, they will assist us in completely blowing up and destabilizing Syria. So unfortunately, Russia has clearly dropped the ball and missed it. Like the Syrian army was not strong enough to defend this quadruple attack between the Israeli-backed, Muslim groups, American-backed Muslim groups, Turkey-backed Muslim groups, and the predominant Turkey-backed Kurdish groups. Okay, now you have to look into each of these things one at a time in order to really understand what the hell is happening. I spend an unreasonable amount of my free time trying to keep up with this stuff, and I tell you, it is complicated as fuck. Okay, now smack in the middle of this are additional terrorist groups that the United States no longer trains, like ISIS and ISIL, because they trained them enough throughout the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, so they no longer need to train them anymore. They are now small nuisance that if the United States really wanted to eliminate, they would, but they have zero reason to eliminate ISIS because ISIS in this area allows the bullshit reason for the United States to come into Syria and set up military bases. Okay, now, where do we go from here? Let's go to, well, actually, that's pretty much it. Other than now, Russians are going to get stuck right here. Russians do want access to the Mediterranean Sea. Russia having its bases over here is very, very useful for Russia. Russia fucked up. They were not able to properly defend Syria. They were not able, Iran is trying to help. Hezbollah is trying to help. But Hezbollah is unable to help because Israel has basically created massive destruction for Hezbollah. I overestimated Hezbollah a little bit. I really thought Hezbollah was going to put up a much bigger fight in the war with Israel, but clearly that didn't happen. Israel did a big number on Hezbollah, and Hezbollah was no longer able to help the Syrian army fight back this onslaught of Turkey, US, and Israel-backed opposition in Syria. So Hezbollah is not able to help. Iran is having their own problems with Israel. So Iran dropped the ball, and they weren't paying attention what can happen in Syria. Russia dropped the ball. They weren't paying attention on what can happen in Syria. Hezbollah dropped the ball. They weren't paying attention on what happens in Syria. And therefore, the West, plus Turkey, because I don't want to call Turkey West, took this opportunity to take over the 4 biggest cities in Syria, being Aleppo, Hama, Homs, and Damascus. And these 4 cities fell so quickly. This was such a coordinated attack. So because all of Syrian support was too busy with their own geopolitical problems. And now Syria has completely fallen. And I think Syria is going to be a giant mess. By the way, there were 2 claims against Bashar al-Assad and his military of using chemical weapons against the Syrian people. One was, I think, in 2013, and the other was a little bit later in 2015 or 2016. So one of them has been proven to be pure fiction. It never happened. The other one was proven that the chemical attack did occur, but the chemical attack actually occurred by one of these Western-trained moderate rebels, which is a fancy way for the United States to say terrorists that we trained that are doing God's work for us. That is the actual definition of moderate rebels, as the United States military likes to say. And it was them that created that chemical attack and blamed it on Bashar al-Assad and Syria. I don't have time to pull up evidence of this. You are welcome to do your own research. Just don't do the research from Western media sources. Try to find other media sources. Redacted has covered it. They have done numerous interviews with investigators. If you go to Russian sources, you can say it's biased because Russia came in to defend Syria. Remember, Syria asked for Russia to come and help. Nobody wanted American military bases in Syria. So American military is in Syria illegally. Russian military is in Syria by Syrian government asking for help from the Russian military. Now, the last time America tried to destabilize and destroy Syria, they had Saudi Arabia and the UAE and other Gulf states on its side. Let me go back to the military map. So the last time America tried to do to Syria what they just did. Saudi Arabia was on the side of the US, so was the UAE, so were many other Gulf states. This time around, Saudi is not involved in this, UAE is not involved in this. Nobody wants a destabilized Syria. Now, a destabilized Syria helps Israel and the US so much. So a completely destabilized Syria now creates such harder conditions for Iran to help Hezbollah. Iran was able to flood Hezbollah with weapons through Iraq and Syria, or directly through Syria by being able to fly into Syria. It's a little bit tricky because Iraq is kind of in between, but Iran is able to fly back and forth to Syria, so they can move weapons into Syria, which then easily find their way in the hands of Hezbollah. So from an Israeli perspective, destabilizing Syria in order to, take down Lebanon is huge. This is a massive advantage for Israel in their, quest to create greater Israel and dominate the Middle East. And for Iran, this fall of Damascus and Syria is absolutely disastrous because now they can't help Hezbollah. If the opposite happened, had Syria, had Russia and Iran and maybe China built up the Syrian military to such strong force that American troops would be kicked out. Kurds would be kicked out back to Turkey. They would annihilate all of the other, what do you call them? Hardcore Muslim Islamist factions off the land of Syria. And Syria became a strong country once again with a very strong oil and gas industry. Then Syria becomes a very dominant force on the level of Iran, that now Israel has a big problem because now they would no longer be able to attack Hezbollah in Lebanon. They would be too strong with a strong Syria next to them. So the fall of Syria basically creates even a worse destabilization there than Iraq. Now, we will see how much longer the American military bases remain, but if American military bases go into full cooperation with the Turkish Kurds, this creates a pretty strong buffer in the north protecting the US oil interests there, while these Islamist factions end up fighting each other after they, genocided all of the Syrian people that thought that life was better under Bashar al-Assad. Now, personally speaking, I'm not here to praise Bashar al-Assad as a saint or a good leader, or I'm not here to do that. All I will say is, if people thought that it was oppressive and terrible living under the rule of Bashar al-Assad, they have no fucking clue what's about to happen. They are about to live under significantly worse conditions than under Bashar al-Assad. If you are in the north of Syria, in the Kurdish area, you are probably a lot better off, but over here is going to be a total disaster. Now, what happens to the Russian military? I don't know. Is Russia going to fight it out? I don't know. What happens between the relations of Russia and Turkey? That is about to be a total clusterfuck. So Russia is probably really pissed at Turkey. Russia wanted a strong, independent Syria because it creates more stability in the region and it helps Russian interests in the region as well. Now, Turkey is trying to file into BRICS, but I don't see how that's going to happen now because Russia has to be pissed at Turkey. Are they pissed enough at Turkey to start a war with Turkey because of what happened in Syria? Probably not. It's probably not that dire, but Russia is certainly not happy. Or one country I also forgot to mention is Armenia. Those of you that have been watching this for the last 30, 40 minutes, Armenia is having the same issues as Georgia and Moldova. Armenia's president has been completely corrupted by the West and the European Union, and he announced he wants to join NATO. So the moment that happened, Russia was protecting the area right here. This is known as Nagorno-Karabakh. It's not the borderland, but it's this mountainous region right here in Azerbaijan, but Armenia claimed it to be Armenia. And this is a very, very interesting region. This is probably not the best map. I need to go to a more of a Google map. Okay, no, right here. See, this is a region of Armenia inside the border of Azerbaijan. These are regions of Azerbaijan inside of the borders of Armenia. You also see this big chunk right here, which is Azerbaijan. You see that it is not, doesn't have a land bridge to the main area of Azerbaijan. This piece of land is stuck between a tiny border with Turkey, a large border with Iran, and a large border with Armenia, and this is a part of Azerbaijan. Now, Russia was protecting Nagorno-Karabakh on behalf of Armenia and preventing any Azerbaijan military from taking over Nagorno-Karabakh. But because Russia had, economic ties and diplomatic ties with Armenia, because Armenia was within Russian sphere of influence, and a lot of Armenians speak Russian. But Armenia is split, just like Georgia, just like Moldova, just like Ukraine. A large majority of the population is pro-Europe, but it's not the majority. I said large majority. A large faction of the population is pro-EU, and this, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but there's certainly a lot of Western propaganda that tries to convince these people in these countries that they should be pro-EU. And if this was an altruistic reason to benefit the people of those countries to be pro-EU, I would potentially even support the Western propaganda effort to try to, convince people in these countries that pro-EU and pro-West is better for their way of life. Unfortunately, the West's efforts to brainwash people into being pro-EU is not done for the benefit of the people. It is done in order for them to then start wars with Russia, just like in Ukraine. Okay, so that's my problem with it. Obviously, I think lots of EU's culture and lifestyle are very, very beneficial. It's a Western lifestyle. But if it comes at a cost of your country being a war zone, it is not worth it. The EU democracy is also non-existent. Like the majority of EU leaders are not elected. It is a straight up dictatorship, and it's turning into the old Soviet Union. So these are my problems with the EU versus the benefits of the EU. But I think the benefits of the EU are starting to disappear, and they're being taken over by the woke culture, and the communist nature is taken over the EU, which is why you don't see me in the European Union much anymore, neither on vacation nor for any business. I would rather go to Southeast Asia, which still has a chance, and especially Latin America, which has their own problems, but those problems are very, very different. Okay. Mechanic, any questions? Anything going on in the live chat? Anything else I need to add on this? I'm trying to think of anything else I forgot to say, but this is basically the major dynamic that's happening in the region. Oh yeah, so after Russia stopped helping and defending Armenia because they announced they want to enter NATO and put missiles in Armenia that would point at Moscow, And the first thing that Azerbaijan did is take over Nagorno-Karabakh. And probably in the near future, if Armenia doesn't come to its senses and becomes friends with Russia again, they're probably going to lose the south side of Armenia because Azerbaijan is going to want to take over this land and build a land bridge to their other land, which is right here. Okay. So Paf Sarda is saying there is no way this was not agreed with Russia in advance. That is an agreed with Russia in advance, meaning Turkey. It is a valid argument. I'm not going to dismiss the argument that Erdogan and Putin had a long talk and there was an agreement between Turkey and Russia that Syria will be lost to half Kurdish forces and half bunch of random hardcore Islamic military factions trained by US and Israel. I will take the opposite side of this statement. I do not believe that this was agreed upon by Putin. First of all, Russia does not want additional military conflict anywhere, especially involving their own forces. Russia has been dominating the air, and they have been bombing all of these attacks, but they just don't have enough presence. They don't have enough airplanes. They don't have enough military power. Remember, Russia has a very, very strong military, but Russian military strength is ground forces like they're doing in Ukraine. Russia is not a naval power. Russia is not an air power, even though they have a very powerful air force. Russia has some of the most modern planes for air bombing, but their air force is still its strength is supporting ground forces directly with supply lines from Russia. Oh, I'm moving another leader here from somewhere. Now, if Syria bordered Russia the way it borders Georgia, the game changes. Then their air force is way more equipped to support the ground forces that would come from Russia. But Russia doesn't have a land bridge to Syria. It's very challenging. Azerbaijan is friendly with the West. They are not in Russia's camp the way Belarus is in Russia's camp, right? Like the Russian military has free reign to walk across the country of Belarus. So if Russia was ever to have a war with Poland or Lithuania, well, the war with Lithuania would last a few days, and or Latvia. Well, Latvia, Russia has a direct land bridge to Latvia. They can walk right through Belarus to Lithuania. They can walk right through Belarus to Warsaw if they needed to have a war with Poland. But they are not able to move their army through Georgia, through Turkey, obviously, because Turkey is actually against Russia on this one, attacking Syria. They can't move their army through Azerbaijan and then through Iran and then through Iraq to get to Syria. That is not feasible for Russia to maintain a supply chain, nor do they have the kind of military that can even do something like that. Their military force is not like US. They don't have military bases all around the world. So Russia is not able to directly help. They're helping as much as they can. And Russia also has trouble getting their navy through the Black Sea, through the Malacca Straits, through Turkey. Is that what it's called? I think so. And then through NATO-occupied Greece and get it here, right? Like the US has warships here. Russia doesn't have major warships here. Imagine if Russia had warships here. This is potentially nuclear confrontation between the US Navy and the Russian Navy off the coast of Cyprus. This is very, very dangerous. Okay. So I don't think Russia and Turkey had a deal here, because if they did, Russia would have, played the peacemaker, and they would have convinced or tried to inform Bashar al-Assad, look, Turkey is going to invade, US-backed terrorist rebels are going to invade, Israel-backed rebels are going to invade, Kurds are going to invade. You need to just, give up. Maybe we leave a tiny piece of Syria over here, this area right here, or maybe this tiny area right here, or maybe this tiny land bordering the Mediterranean, and the rest of your country of Syria is going to fall. And you need to flee the country right away, come here to Russia. We are no longer able to support you militarily. That's what would have happened. I really don't think that Turkey agreed with Russia and then battled it out on the battlefield. I just don't see that. I think Russia is very, very pissed. But what is Russia going to do about it? I don't know. Remember, Istanbul was once called Constantinople, and this at one point was Russian territory as well. So perhaps Russia is going to play the long game, and eventually they will take a part of Turkey, at least their old parts. Now, there is a big difference between, Russia is not like the United States or other countries. Historically, Russia is not Rome. Russia does not take over other countries. Now, there is an asterisk here. During the days of the Soviet Union, the days of the Soviet Union was not a Russian occupation of other countries, contrary to what the textbooks will tell you. The Soviet Union was a communist mentality where your borders did not matter. What mattered was the communist ideology. And this is why throughout the Soviet Union's communist days, the leaders of the Soviet Union were never actually Russian. Very few of them were. The main leader, after he probably poisoned and assassinated Lenin, was Stalin. And Stalin came from Gori, Georgia. The Gori, Georgia has a Stalin museum. I actually went there. If you zoom in on this map, you'll find the Stalin Museum here, okay? Somewhere. It's a museum about Stalin. And Gori Fortress, Stalin Museum, there it is, okay? I've been here. I went to check it out. I was curious. And he ruled Georgia. He ruled the Soviet Union for 30 years, at least. And after him was Khrushchev, who was from the region of Ukraine. And after him was Brezhnev, who was from the region of Ukraine. So the leaders of the Soviet Union, they weren't, like Tsar Russia. And the old Tsar Russia didn't care to occupy other nations. And the current leader of Russia is not interested in that either. Putin is not interested in, say, taking over Poland and making Poland greater Russia. That's not the plan. Okay. Now, the only regions that are being taken by Russia and absorbed into Russia are what Russia considers historic Russian lands. that are occupied and currently dominated by people that see themselves as Russia. Now, these lands do extend. The majority of Latvia could be put into this category. A part of Lithuania could be put into this category. The majority of Belarus could be put into this category, but Belarus is a nation that is friendly with Russia, so there is no reason to take over those regions. And several parts of Georgia. And meanwhile, the opposite is happening in Kazakhstan. Now, Kazakhstan is actually in reverse. Here is a large country of Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan probably has lots of claims on land that is currently Russia, but Kazakhstan is not in a military position to attack Russia and take what is perceived to be their land. But Kazakhstan is now on good relations with Russia, so there's no reason to fight over this border. And as long as Russia is not oppressing Kazakhstani Kazakhs that live on the Russian border, and as long as Kazakhstan is not oppressing the Russians living in their border, there's no problems between the two nations. Okay. China and Russia have their own border dispute, which is not a big deal because very few people live there. And these border disputes happen all the time. Okay. One last thing I want to mention, and by the way, look at all the links in this video description. Brian Berletic has done incredible coverage, absolutely incredible. His last video is a must-watch. I watched this video this morning, Syria, a battle lost amid a wider war. He has incredible, well, actually, maybe we can listen to a small part of it. Hold on. Mechanic, if you're back, so let me know if there's any good comments. Someone is saying Syrian army was bribed out of the fight. Very possible. I haven't seen any evidence of that. Very, very possible. Syrian army also might have felt that they couldn't win. And if you know you can't win and you can just flee and surrender, that's a better option than dying on a battlefield if you know that you can't win this war. So, Mechanic, if you are back, let me know if there's any questions.
Yeah, I will do.
Someone is saying I am absolutely wrong on Armenia. I don't see how that is possible. Everything I said about Armenia is factual. It's already happened. The only thing you can say I am wrong on Armenia is that Azerbaijan will eventually take over more regions of Armenia in order to build a land bridge. I mean, that's just speculation. I can't be right or wrong on that. That's just my opinion. But all shit hit the fan for Armenia the moment they turned their back on Russia, who was helping them militarily as long as Armenia was friends with Russia. But once Armenia turned their back on Russia and sided with the West, because the West cannot accept a country that is neutral between Russia and the West. Turkey is the closest thing that is neutral between Russia and the West, but Turkey is the biggest military in Europe, and Turkey is a big country, and there's nothing Russia or the US can do to stop Turkey from playing both sides to their maximum advantage. Eventually, it's going to bite Turkey in the ass, but eventually could be a lifetime away. No, I don't use sunblock, guys. I just stay away from seed oils, so I do get burned and I do get a tan, but I'm not worried about skin cancer from the sun because I don't eat seed oils. Again, a whole show could be devoted to this.
Tom,
Don't
do you
eat
see
seed
this
oils?
report? Do you see this
What's up?
report that the US military apparently just striked ISIS in Syria?
Yeah, I think it's bullshit. The US is the reason why. The US is supporting ISIS in Syria. I don't believe it for a second that the US would fire a single bullet at ISIS. Maybe after Syria has completely fallen, or the only way it's possible that the United States has fired a single BB at ISIS is ISIS did their job. ISIS was trained by the US military. They did their job. They have collapsed the Syrian government, and therefore ISIS is no longer needed to destabilize Syria, and therefore the US military is now free to fire at ISIS instead of giving them weapons and training them. Could be a little bit of a cynical take on the existence of ISIS, but good luck trying to prove me wrong.
No, I completely agree, because the whole point is destabilization of these nations, and ISIS is only helpful. That's why they put there in the first place. But at some point, people outlive their usefulness. That's the point.
Right.
So, who knows?
Right.
But,
Right. If the US is firing at ISIS, that means ISIS has been played to its maximum capacity as a useful idiot for US and Israeli armies, and the US and Israeli armies can now fire on ISIS. But again, if the US army and the Israeli army do wipe out ISIS from Syria, it's possible that the Syrian army could come back and claim the land back. So this is the reason why I don't believe the United States would remove their proxy ISIS from Syrian land. They need maximum destabilization for at least a decade or two in order for all the young new kids born in Syria to be full-blown jihadists. Otherwise, this coup did not serve much of a purpose. So Brian Berletic, excellent coverage of it. He also points out a couple of documents that I want to show you guys. So this is where I got the list of organizations that the United States perceives as labeled as terrorist organizations. And you will see that on this document, this is a US government document that was leaked. I forgot who leaked it. A lot of it is redacted, but in this document, it clearly states the US military and government support for what the US calls moderate rebels. And it lists these moderate rebels by their actual names. And when you cross-check it against the list of organizations US claims are terrorist organizations, you will see a large overlap of what the US military actually supports, which organizations, and you can cross-check them that these organizations from this leaked document from the US government of the organizations they are supporting with weapons are on the US terrorist list. He also points to this document. This is not a leaked document. This is a published document. I did not read all 354 pages. That would be insane. This is a 2019 document by Duran Corporation. And the title of this document is Extending Russia. And it's basically a document how to create regime change in Russia. Oh, wait, did I hit the back button or something? Here we go. Let me zoom in. And you can just look at the table of contents. And this is an entire document of how to destabilize Russia and how to make Russia go away. And the really interesting part is chapter 4, titled Geopolitical Measures. Remember, this was written in 2019, and this is listed in order of the importance of things that the US government would like to do in order to take down Russia. Provide lethal aid to Ukraine. This was done under the Trump administration. So measure 1 is playing out to its maximum capacity. That has been achieved. Measure 2, increase support to the Syrian rebels. This is everything I explained today. This has been in the works since 2014, written about in this document in 2019, and has finally reached its conclusion this week in 2024, going into 2025. Destabilize Syria as a way to destroy Russia. Measure number 3, promote regime change in Belarus. This was attempted, but this failed. Measure number 3 failed. Russia would have loved to turn Belarus into Ukraine at the same time as Ukraine, creating a two-front war for Russia with Belarus and Ukraine. But Belarusian government was strong enough to kick out the American NGOs, the American propaganda media was removed from Belarus. Belarus was able to avoid a color revolution, and it wasn't easy with Lukashenko being called a dictator and everything else. So measure number 3 failed. What about measure number 4? Exploit tensions in the South Caucasus. In case anyone is wondering what the hell are the South Caucasus, I have discussed the South Caucasus. That is Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. This is South Caucasus. Georgia, I already discussed it in this video. Armenia, I discussed it in this video, and Azerbaijan has its own issues. You can look into it. I gotta post references to all these videos in the comment section. Please check them out. This is active now. Belarus failed. Ukraine succeeded. Syria has just succeeded, but Syria has been succeeding for a long time because remember, it diverted a lot of Russian military and Russian attention to Syria. Russia would have had a much easier time in Ukraine if it didn't have to deal with the problems in Syria. And the problems in Georgia are potentially bad right now, and Russia is trying to, resolve them, just like Russia helped Belarus resolve its problems that were written about in this paper of how to destabilize Russia. Now, measure number 5, reduce Russian influence in Central Asia. This measure is failing. Central Asia, again, what the hell is Central Asia? Central Asia is Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and Turkestan. This is Central Asia and Afghanistan. Now, this measure is failing. Russia has been able to have very good relations with Kazakhstan. But remember, America tried to create a color revolution in Kazakhstan just a few years earlier, and it was squashed by both Kazakhstan with the assistance of Russia. Uzbekistan is, again, same thing. They haven't been able to pull off any kind of revolution there. And they want to destabilize this region as well, but they have had trouble doing so. Now, I have other stories. I've been to Kazakhstan. I've heard presentations. Kazakhstan, there's still a lot of people in Kazakhstan that are adversarial to Russia, but in my view, that's a mistake. That's your neighbor. You want to play nice with your neighbor. You don't want to be the next Ukraine. And finally, the last measure, and again, this is in order of importance. See how important Belarus was? Not as important as Syria, but pretty important. And finally, challenge Russian presence in Moldova. I talked about it earlier today as well. The United States is trying to completely destabilize Moldova and turn into the next Ukrainian front. Okay, so Becca says, we don't need Russian help in Georgia. Oh, no, you don't need Russian. No, no one is saying you need Russian help in Georgia. The Georgian government may want Russian help in Georgia because you have to remember that if Georgia goes the way of Ukraine, there will be no Georgia. I know it's a valiant effort to think and be brainwashed by the West that the best outcome for Georgia is to join NATO and the European Union and fight till the last Georgian is born in order to weaken Russia, right? Again, you have to understand that the brainwashing in the Republic of Georgia to join the European Union and the West and America is not done for the good, from the goodness of the heart of the Europeans to help Georgia. It is done for the sole purpose to destabilize Russia, to have the Russian military come in and kill every Georgian. That is the goal. The goal of convincing Georgia that they should be European is not for the benefit of the Georgian people. It's for the benefit of the American neocons, so that Georgia puts missiles pointed at Moscow to force Moscow and the Russians to come and take Georgian land and basically kill Georgians. And most people that are pro-EU in Georgia just don't understand this simple fact. Right? Now, when in 2008, I don't know about the 90s. Remember, you can't, your argument that Russia invaded Georgia in the 90s and in 2008. In the 90s, Russia wasn't the Russia of today. In the 90s, Russia was still coming out of communism, and Russia was ruled by a combination of brainwashed communists and oligarchs that just wanted land and resources and money. Okay. Today, Russia is a borderline, Orthodox religious nation. Russia today is not interested in taking over other people's land for just the sake of, greater Russia. That's not the Russia of today. Russia of the 90s does not compare to the Russia of today. Now, Russia of 2008 absolutely compares to the Russia of today. So let's talk about what happened in 2008 for 5 minutes, because after that, I'm going to have to get going. Let me go to a Google map here, and let's go to Georgia. And by the way, Georgia is one of my favorite countries. I love Georgia. Georgia was in my top 5 countries that I want to live in and I want to spend time in. Now, that doesn't mean I can't be objective and talk honestly and critically about Georgia. Georgia is one of my favorite cuisines. Tbilisi is one of my top 5 favorite cities in the world. I absolutely love Georgia, but Georgia fucked up, okay? You fuck around and you find out. Now, in 2008, I have a whole document on this, right? You can look at my, where's my document on Russia? Russia versus Ukraine. We can go to 2008. Oops, I didn't mean to be typing. We can go to 2008. Right here, okay? We can say this conflict started in 2008 when Ukraine and Georgia officially filed for a NATO membership. Okay, so here you go. I have a link in this document right here, and it explains how Georgia decided to announce that they are going to join NATO. What is NATO? NATO is an offensive military alliance whose only purpose is to destroy Russia. And when in 2008, the Republic of Georgia announced that they are going to join NATO, that means they are putting missiles in Georgia aimed at Russia and Moscow. Now, these missiles may or may not reach Moscow. Obviously, Ukraine missiles are closer to Moscow. But if Georgia joins the EU and the NATO, if the West's military and geographical alliance, that means that they are now controlled by the European Union, which means that the Western propaganda and regime change would spread into this area of Russia, which is Chechnya. Okay, Russia had already had to spend years and years and years wiping out the radical Islamists in Chechnya. And all of that would come back if Georgia was to join the European Union. Just like the American military is training Islamist terrorists in Syria for their benefit, the same thing would have happened here on the border between Russia and Georgia. Now, this area of Russia is very, very Muslim. And now you have a hostile a military force on your border where you have a large Muslim population. Of course, they're gonna try to create terrorist organizations out of this Russian Muslim population bordering Georgia, because now America would set up their military bases on the border of Georgia. So Russia came in, wiped out the Georgian military, and basically said, if you continue to join NATO, your country will not exist. And since they were already there, they took two regions of Georgia that are currently contested land. And if Georgia continues to fuck around, the majority of Georgia will be Russia, and it will be another Ukraine. And this is happening because Russia does not want American military on its border. And if Georgia becomes a good neighbor and has good economic ties with Russia and doesn't join any Western military alliance, then Georgia would have been left alone and Russia would have never set foot onto that soil. So basically, I want to go to Georgia. I don't want to piss off people in Georgia so that I'm hated in Georgia like I'm hated in Ukraine. But if Georgia's going to keep fucking around, they're not going to have a country to call their own. And Georgia is a very ancient country. Goes back 5,000 plus years of actual Georgia. But if they continue to aggravate and create a military problem for Russia, they just won't exist. Okay. Officially, 80% of Georgians want to join the EU. I will take the under on your statistic, okay? But I will also say 90% of Georgians under the age of 40 have been completely brainwashed and are not looking out for their preservation of their hearts beating, okay? Because they have been completely brainwashed by convincing that they should join the EU. Okay, so yes, 80% of Georgians want to join the EU. That doesn't mean it's a good idea, right? Your 5-year-old child wants to eat ice cream all day. That doesn't mean it's a good idea. Okay. On this note, I think I'm done. I mean, look, if you really want to know what is happening, if what is happening to any country that borders Russia or Syria, read this paper. This paper has been the plan of the United States long before 2019 when it was written, but everything in this paper has been put into action. And some succeeded, like Ukraine and Syria, and borderline succeeding in Georgia, and borderline succeeding in Moldova, with a few failures like Belarus.
Really interesting stream, brother. I'm probably going to shoot off.
Yeah, no, I think I'm done. I got to go to dinner. Okay, Bitcoin, watch the Financial Summit YouTube channel, guys. Go over there. Nothing's happening. I'm bullish long term. We got a green star candle on the weekly. We're gonna get a green star candle on the daily, probably tomorrow. And we're all set. I mean, I'm thinking 110, 120 before the top's made. At least 106. I'm bullish here and I'm long. No, Russians don't have documents to destroy the United States. Neither does China. But yeah, but US has these kinds of documents. There is another document. Brian Berletic talks about it as well. I'll talk about it in other videos. It's uh, there's a similar document about like just U.S. domination of the world, which these countries don't have. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me, guys. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all on the next one. Maybe I'll glance at your live chat. Mechanic, did you see anything in the live chat that's interesting that I should
Nothing that
address?
you haven't addressed. I would add that the EU is just garbage, and that anyone that wants to join it is working against their own. You know, it's a complete ridiculous entity. It's just reeks of globalism. I was in a country that I was stupid enough to vote to remain in the EU when I lived in Britain, and I still was a UK citizen. So I've since realized that what a stupid thing that was, and how lucky we were that Brexit happened, but it wasn't really allowed to happen, right? It just sort of happened in
Right.
name only. But
Right. It was actually it was actually worse, man. So with the Brexit, what really happened was, first of all, the elites that allowed for a Brexit vote never expected the vote to go against the EU. But when it did go against the EU, the people got the worst of both worlds. They wanted to prove to the Brits that leaving the EU was a bad idea. So they cut off all the benefits that Britain had by being in the EU, but they didn't implement any of the benefits that would come by not being in the EU. So people got like the worst part of exiting, but not the best part of exiting, which was just a pathetic attempt to spite the people that voted for Brexit.
yeah, it wasn't allowed to have been a success, naturally.
Well, Becca says those two areas were invaded in the 90s. They might again, I don't go back to the 90s history because that's old history. They were completely dominated as of 2008. But in the 90s, remember what happened in the 90s? Russia broke up in the 90s, right? And borders of every country that bordered Russia were not drawn very well because when Georgia and Russia and Azerbaijan and Armenia, this was all one country. The communists never expected to lose this single USSR. So borders got changed. This is how Ukraine ended up double the size it should have been. All of these regions of Ukraine, all of these east regions of Ukraine should have never been Ukraine. The only reason why these regions were Ukraine is because two of Soviet Union leaders, Brezhnev and Khrushchev, who were born in this area, decided to alter the border while it was all one country and claim it to be Ukraine, right? Georgia is different, right? Like this land was occupied by lots of people, and after Russia broke up, some of the oligarchs, some of the people that were ruling Russia before Russia became the country it is today, that tries to follow, international laws and international orders, that country didn't exist. So yeah, all kinds of crazy shit happened in the 90s, right? Blaming current Russia for what happened in the 90s is stupid. It's like blaming the Soviet Union for what happened back then. It's not the same country anymore, right? It doesn't make any sense at all. All right, guys. That's it. Coming up screen share. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you learned something. And check out the links in the description. I will recommend, no, I'm gonna go back to screen share. I just want to recommend a couple of channels that are doing a great job of covering this. One of them is, of course, Brian Berletic, who in his last like 5 videos were absolutely excellent. He also explains how the Trump administration is completely terrible, and I agree with him on this. I do want to do my own show on it, but he's done a great job. He also makes the case that Israel is a subsidiary of the US, like a 51st state, and not the other way around, which is also, debatable. And yeah, so his last 4 or 5 videos have been absolutely excellent. They cover Trump, they cover the Ukraine war, and they cover the Syrian conflict. Great content. And I would say my number one go-to source is the Duran. The Duran is probably the best source. This is my number one go-to source for geopolitical information. And I do watch Judge Napolitano, but I mean, at least Brian Berletic gives a little bit of a opposite take sometimes from the Duran, so it's good. Judge Napolitano is also a good resource, and of course, I watch Military Summary every day as well. So definitely check out the videos from the Duran. And this morning's video from Military Summary was also very good. He is also covering the conflict in Syria. He mostly covers only Russia, Ukraine, but this conflict in Syria directly relates to Russia, Ukraine. So he's starting to cover it as well. Also strongly recommend if you're looking for sources. Lots of links in the video description. I have all these documents relating to every conflict. I had to split up the Syria Middle East conflict from the Israeli Middle East conflict. They are very different, but they are, of course, connected. I have my document on Latin America. I'm not covering Latin America all that much, and the Russian document is probably the most extensive. Where the hell did it go? I just pointed to. I was just clicking from it. There it is. There's the Russian document. Okay, you'll find them under my Russian videos about Russia, Ukraine. You'll find Israel on my videos, Israel-Gaza, and you'll find, I've done one Latin American video, but I need to do more. All right, guys. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all on the next one. Bye, guys.